Story 1. I almost presenced a rape scene. This happened to me some hours ago. English is not my primary language, so sorry for any faults. I had been out all day and was returning home at 23 p.m. I got out of the train station and started walking towards my house. I live in a funny neighborhood, so at this time of the day I picked up a route with more cars, lights, people, etc. As I was walking, I saw something strange on the other side of the road. Two men, big as doors, black, one with glasses, were forcing a young girl to go with them. This obviously creeped me out, but I can't imagine being in her situation. They were groping her, taking her bag, making fun of her, and she was saying all the time that she wanted to go home and telling them to leave her alone. Clearly, they would NT, and the girl was scared. Look, I had to be on time on my house or I wouldn't go out the next day. But seeing that situation, I just felt I had to do something. I slowly followed them, maybe 10 meters behind them. I started dialing 911 and told the speaker the situation. The two men and the girl took another darker, lonelier street, IDK if that's correct law. And I just stood where I was, talking with the dialer. My plan was to let them advance some meters so they wouldn't see me approaching. I didn't want my ass kicked tonight, but I was desperate as I couldn't tell the dialer a concrete direction, just the street. While I was talking, two other guys were standing close to me, looking in direction to the scene. Basically, I was not alone. They were also suspicious. They discussed a little bit about it and started running quietly towards them, so I did too. Honestly, if these two other guys weren't with me then, I wouldn't have had the courage to keep on following them. The two men got the girl inside a local and we stood outside. I told the dialer what the local was and he assured me he would send a patrol. While I was talking, one of the men walked out of the local and asked me, "Are you looking for someone?" I convinced him I was just waiting for my mother to come pick me up, and he got back inside. I finally hung up, thanked the two guys for helping, and they told me to go home. They would wait there until the police arrives to tell them where the girl is. I just walked home and here I am. I just hope everything turned good for the girl. Some things I learned are, it doesn't matter where you are not safe in the streets at night if you are a young girl. And also, that people are rats. There was a lot of people in the street watching the situation, and no one did anything other than us. Anyways, that was my story. Story 2. The Window Peeper. This has stayed with me my whole life and still creeps me out to think about it. I grew up in an apartment complex on the very edge of town. We had a 3-floor apartment on the first floor. There were a lot of single mothers that lived in the complex, and the complex was fairly isolated. I shared a bedroom with my sister and my mother had her own room. It was very quiet at night, so you could hear things clearly with the windows open. It was surrounded by corn and soybean fields, so some nights you could only hear crickets and the rustling of leaves in the field. And then some nights you would hear the creeper. It was always late at night. You'd hear footsteps walking down the sidewalk from one of the buildings on the far end of the parking lot, walking slowly down the pavement. Then the rustle of feet and grass walking up the lawn to our window. And we'd see a shadow. It would just stand there and occasionally he would scratch a finger across the screen. I was 11/12 and my sister was 14. We'd be terrified. Then there would be rustling, and he'd go to my mother's window. And eventually he'd wander off. We tried switching rooms, and he'd know which rooms were the new ones. We called the police, notified management, but the response was pretty minimal. And we knew who it was. There was a guy who lived in one of the nearby windows who was always washing his car and would just stare at the young girls and women while he worked on his car. He always worked shirtless and wore cowboy boots, and he was so creepy looking. He'd literally wear only a Speedo and his boots, and he did not have the body for it. I'd be skateboarding and he'd just watch me in the most predatory fashion. He scared the hell out of me. This went on for years. And we found out other women and girls were being visited. He never went to an apartment where there was a grown man or even an older boy living. Only single moms and their daughters. When I hit my teen years, I wanted to go out with a bat, but my mother wouldn't let me. He eventually moved away and it stopped. I always wonder if it ever escalated with him and he actually physically harmed someone. To this day, I can't watch movies where a woman is pursued by a silent killer, Halloween-type movies. There was something about the predatory silence of it all that was petrifying. Story 3. He ate her. I worked for a domestic violence shelter years ago. A year after I quit working, I stumbled on an article about a semi-local man who had been arrested for capturing a female, keeping her locked in a cage half-naked, killing her, and finally skinning and eating her. They found some of her remains in the freezer. The woman was one of the ladies I looked after in the shelter for months. Story 4. My first date as an adult with zero dating experience. I was smoking with this guy I just met. He picked me up and he handed me the blunt. I noticed he wasn't really smoking it. He stopped at Wawa for gas and offered me a drink. I declined. Just a few minutes of driving and he pulls over and a man walks up to the driver's side. He claims it's his cousin, and he said he wanted to hang with him and offered me to go back to his place and hang out with the both of them. I said no thank you, and he took me home. Next thing I know, I'm so drugged up I could barely make it off the couch. Someone had to take care of me. I was fucked up. Clearly the weed was laced, and they had plans for me, but he ended up just taking me home. I never confronted him, just blocked him. And like 2 years later, he randomly messaged me on my PS4 saying he moved to my area. Bruh. Story 5. Fight or freeze. Last year I noticed a group of people stalking me. I used to think it was odd. I kept seeing cars running behind me, and my mom slowly these people would park their car by me and I asked them if they needed help, and they get scared and drive off. I noticed there's this house next to my truck. The house was left open. No one lives in this house, but I find it odd there are so many people coming in and out of this house. The house isn't even up for sale. These people are always going in and out, crowding around my vehicle. It makes me creep out. They just stare at me. One day I saw a black spook taking a picture of me with a long camera lens, the kind of camera paparazzi use. The weird thing is I'm not a criminal or anything, but I find it disturbing someone keeps stalking me. I'll look in the corner of my eye and I'll see a man following me. I have a problem with the sight of my vision. This person seems to have knowledge of my disability, so I'm afraid this man going to kill me using my disability against me. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe for more.